All right, good morning. We are going to kick off right on time here. We have a lot of content to cover. But first, how about Devs on Stage? Best show on the Vegas Strip, one day only. Man, it's just it's a great conference. I'm really excited about the new features that are coming down. Thank you for joining us this morning. This is Tableau Blueprint, Agility and Deployment Best Practices. This is a session for IT and infrastructure admins, people that were handed Tableau servers and told, you need to get this up and running. People that want to maybe extend their deployment and make it a bit more responsive to user demand. So we'll have that focus today. Thank you so much for coming. Again, we're really excited about Blueprint. You may have noticed that being kind of a theme for us this year. I am Zachary Ahrens. I have been with Tableau for 5 years in our professional services. I'm a principal solution architect. A little about me, we had twins this year in my family, so I have an ever-growing data family at home. And just really excited to be here for a week, getting a little bit of rest in Vegas. So, and with me today is my good friend Grant Eaton.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Grant Eaton, and I'm a delivery manager with Tableau Professional Services based up in Seattle, and I manage a small team of professional services consultants. Prior to my role at Tableau, I've been with Tableau for about 2 years, but one of the roles I held prior to Tableau was managing a center of excellence for a BI and reporting analytics solution at a large health insurer. So I've been in the place where many of you today in the audience might find yourselves on the IT side of the table, needing to maintain and own Tableau, and that's why I'm really excited to talk to you about Blueprint, because it gives us a great framework for making that operate the best possible. On a personal note, I love to travel. I've been to about 50 countries, and this year I was blessed to be able to go to Stonehenge. And as an interesting fact about Stonehenge is that the monument's about 5,000 years old, and the reason that it's been able to survive so long, 5,000 years of English reign, is because it's crafted of the hardest stones known in the United Kingdom. And the ancients who built this must have known this property of this stone, because they cut these stones out and dragged them 180 miles across Wales to build the monument. So the fact that it's built out of the hardest stones is what's made it endure. And by the same token, I think by following best practices and what the Blueprint Agility phase offers us is the ability to build a Tableau server deployment that stands the test of time and is able to also adapt with the organization and grow and be successful. All right, well, let's get down to business. This is a technical presentation, as Zach mentioned, that's intended for an IT audience and server administrators. And today we're going to walk you through the journey of how to build a more agile Tableau server deployment. And to do that, we're going to introduce you to the agility phase of Tableau Blueprint and show you 2 hypothetical customers and how they each approach the Blueprint phase. And my goal for you today is to leave this room with the confidence to be able to administrate and manage Tableau in an agile way. And if you get one thing out of this session, it's my hope that you leave this room feeling more comfortable adopting an upgrade cadence that is, say, every 6 months you're upgrading to a new release of Tableau software, because Blueprint Agility really gives you the tools to be able to accomplish that. You might want to take out your camera phones now and grab a snapshot of this slide and the next one, because if you're interested in agility, there are a couple of other sessions, actually about 4 others, that you might be interested in either getting the recordings to them because they've already passed or joining. One of them is the Tableau Blueprint Hammer and Nail Edition that's delivered by Principal Consultant Michael Cox, as well as using the Tableau Blueprint Planner. And an interesting thing about that bottom session is that the person who's hosting it is the architect of Tableau Blueprint. So this is a really awesome one if you get a chance to attend that, to meet one of the founders of Blueprint. We also have a couple of sessions, one on self-service and governance, the art of balance and providing self-service data sources out. That's available by recording, and then best practices for updating your analytics strategy. All right, I'm really excited to talk to you today about Blueprint, because it's something that we have needed for a long time, and our customers have been asking for it for a long time. Tableau Blueprint is a new methodology for governing your deployment of Tableau Server. And it initially began life, or in years prior, we had a methodology called Drive. And Drive was liked by some folks, and other folks said that this methodology didn't quite meet their needs. So what we did is we scrapped Drive and rebuilt from the ground up a new methodology called Blueprint. And at the heart of every data-driven organization, you'll find 3 core capabilities, and these are what Blueprint focuses on. And those are agility, proficiency, and community. And these 3 capabilities are the pillars of Blueprint, and they are supported by organizational intent, change management, and trust. And scaling out your Tableau solution also means measuring and proving its impact on the enterprise's transformational goals using data and analytics. And this means understanding which metrics capture best the cumulative impact of your iterative deployments, governance practices, and increasing analytic skill sets and community growth. This is what we call the subway map for Blueprint, and it's really an overview of all the different destination points you can explore with Blueprint. Today, we're going to be focused on those areas surrounded by the orange boxes here. So first, we're going to talk about analytics strategy and surveys, as well as executive advocacy and project teams. And then we'll move in to talk about the agility branch of Blueprint, which is specifically deployment, monitoring, and maintenance. What do we mean when we say agility? Well, first, an agile platform is one that is secure and stable from day one. And second, that platform can proactively adapt to the business and grow over time without the platform's owners being caught off guard. In the agility section of Tableau Blueprint, we're focused on 3 areas primarily. Those are the deployment, monitoring, and maintenance of Tableau. And these mean that, number 1, we start off with a right-size, secure environment. At the same time as we do that, we put in place the people, culture, and tools to build a proactive and scalable analytics platform. Then we move into creating a cadence of ongoing data gathering and responsiveness to the business so that the platform can grow and evolve over time. All right, let's dive into the agility section of Blueprint and discover what that means in practical terms. To help us on our journey today, we're going to use 2 fictitious customers that we'll call Goofus and Gallant Corp. And these were derived from experiences I had as a kid where I would go to a doctor's office and there was this magazine called Highlights for Children in the waiting room. And I loved to read this magazine. And one of the cartoons that I enjoyed reading in it was this cartoon called Goofus and Gallant. And this has been around for like 80 years. It dates back to like 1936. It's been around a really long time, and if you're a person of a certain age or you have got kids, you probably remember this. Goofus was a character who introduced the wrong way to do things, the wrong way to show up, and they would illustrate, by contrast, Gallant's actions, which were the better way to do things. And in our work as solution architects in Tableau Professional Services, we've been in and out of customers or teams who have approached things in either the right way or the wrong way. And so as we walk through Blueprint today, we're going to use a fictitious example of Goofus and Gallant Corp to help illustrate the example of the right way and the wrong way to approach agility. So the moral of the story is, don't be Goofus. All right, so Goofus and Gallant Corp are both in similar situations, but they approach the situation differently. Both of them are $2 billion enterprises with about 15,000 employees. They've got an analytics data warehouse already and several legacy reporting tools. They're replacing those tools with Tableau to enable self-service data governance. How they're going to go about this is still a little bit of a mystery to both of them. They anticipate that they'll deploy Tableau over 18 months, starting with an initial rollout phase to early adopters of maybe 1,000 users, then growing to perhaps 3,000 to 5,000 users, and finally finishing at 8,000 to 10,000 users 18 months from now. They don't know how that journey is going to play out and what the growth is going to look like and how they're going to handle that. So that's where Blueprint comes in. The first stop on the Blueprint journey is to conduct 2 surveys, and the first one is the Enterprise Architecture Survey. So as you're planning your deployment, you should document the current enterprise architecture, and what this does is this survey answers the question, how will Tableau be integrated with your existing technology investments? Because Tableau is integrated with everything in your organization, like hardware, network, databases, applications, authentication systems, and so forth, it's really important to understand how all these things interoperate, and it's the key for installation and configuration and for ongoing platform operations. So in the links below on this slide, if you go to tableau.com/blueprint and search for Enterprise Architecture Survey, Discovery Process, and Blueprint Planner, those are all assets that factor into that Enterprise Architecture Survey. The next stop on Blueprint is the Data and Analytics Survey. So before the deployment of Tableau Server, line of business sponsors should survey their departments and teams to help them prioritize sources of data and training needs. So this answers the question, how is data used today? And what skill sets are needed in each of the participating teams to make this successful? Business teams who will be using Tableau should complete the Data and Analytics Survey or work with IT to help them facilitate building out that survey and documenting this information. And the purpose of this survey is to identify sources of data that are important to job functions and prioritize those sources of data and how to certify them for launch, and also to plan end user training needs. The final survey step is to evaluate your use cases and data sources that support those use cases. This is really a question of how do you identify and prioritize access to data? So to identify initial use cases, you'll use the information gathered in the Data and Analytics Survey that I previously mentioned. You'll do that with every team and prioritize which sources of data are going to be the most impactful at launch for your audience. And if you're just getting started or transitioning from a traditional top-down reporting approach that was driven by IT over to a governed self-service approach driven by Tableau, then it's advantageous for IT or the centralized BI team to build those initial use cases and build them across departments and include trusted data sources and dashboards into this use case. So reference those links I mentioned below from tableau.com/blueprint. Additionally, as you're getting started, one of the first things you'll want to do is focus on executive advocacy roles. So executive sponsors work with the project team to consider how to scale the technology, but also to provide adequate support, training, and structure to effectively roll out Tableau to the organization. And the executive sponsorship team helps break through organizational roadblocks to become a data-driven enterprise. Maximizing analytics investments and capitalizing on the transformative potential of data means that everyone accessing it, regardless of their skill level and data fluency, must be able to turn insights into opportunities, innovations, or action. In addition to executive sponsorship, you'll also need to define which team members will support each area of the analytics solution. The cross-functional project team is going to include IT and BI administrators, Tableau Server and site administrators, and selected content creators. Their focus includes defining governance processes, policies and guidelines, as well as defining roles and responsibilities for managing the organization's data in compliance with business and/or regulatory obligations. And they're responsible for planning and executing the deployment of Tableau and implementing the sponsor's vision for modern analytics. All right, let's check back in with Goofus Corp and Gallant Corp and see how they both approach this phase. So Goofus Corp, first decision that they make is they don't survey their analytics landscape. And the impact here is that IT is flying blind. They have no insights into how Tableau is going to integrate short-term or long-term with the rest of the organization's infrastructure and what analytics are in place and how those will be transitioned to Tableau. Also, they identify only one part-time Tableau server admin. And the impact of this is that Tableau may be insufficiently supported and they're not able to adopt and grow with the business the way they would like to. They also make the mistake of not assigning data stewards. And by doing this, they set data governance up for a failure, for poor data quality and data that doesn't meet the end user's self-service needs. And lastly, Goofus Corp doesn't put in place community leadership. So the business is left to their own devices to figure out how to use Tableau and when they should adopt it and how to roll it out to their organization. By contrast, let's take a look at Gallant Corp. So Gallant Corp starts off by doing the analytics surveys we talked about and gets executive and cross-team buy-in so that everyone has a stake in the game and a voice to be heard and has an influence in the outcome. That's really important that IT engage with the business. They also identify at least 2 Tableau Server admins, and they arrange training for them so that right off the bat, they know how to support Tableau. They've got adequate coverage when one is out, and they're able to keep the platform moving forward. Additionally, they make the decision to assign data stewards in the business units, and those data stewards create governed, published data sources. They groom the data. The data is designed to meet the business users' needs, and that positions Tableau for success. Lastly, they identify a community leader who's going to be responsible for setting up wikis, Slack channels, monthly or quarterly meetings, and that person is going to act as a liaison between IT and the business and between different business units and each other so that a data culture can begin to develop from the grassroots up. All right, now that we've talked through that, our next stop is the deployment phase of the agility branch of Blueprint. And deployment is focused on building a right-sized, secure deployment from day one.
And building that right-sized deployment really is key, and that's really why we talk about these surveys, giving yourself a chance to evaluate what you currently have, what your current needs are, and what sort of platforms you can actually host Tableau in. Allows you to really kick off your deployment quickly. The Tableau server runs on premises and public clouds and Tableau online if you don't want to run a server. And so we can be very flexible based on what your current IT infrastructure looks like. Server will run on Windows and Linux, which is great, and our client tools can run on Windows and Mac. We also have web interface for authoring now, which if you haven't used web edit in Tableau in the last year or so, there's so much more capabilities there than there have been. We're making huge advances there, so you may not even need client software for some of your basic use cases. Of course, mobile and embedded, where we embed in other applications or in other BI portals. The Tableau server is configured as a multi-service environment. So these all run either on one node or multiple nodes, depending on how your workload looks on the Tableau server. We can scale up or out based on how complex your workloads are. Maybe you have huge data sets but simple dashboards. Maybe you have very complicated dashboards with smaller data sets. We can right-size the server based on what those use cases look like. Another thing that we should always consider when we're doing our deployments is how are we going to get the client software out to the users? For the most part, users will use Tableau Desktop and Tableau Prep Builder if they're creating content. As a best practice, it's good to get these as packaged installers through corporate IT so that everyone's on the same versions, and particularly not having to deal with license keys. With a prepackaged installer, you can build that licensing in so a user can just click and download, and from a controlled standpoint, send out maintenance releases, and when you upgrade your server, also upgrade your client machines. So what are our variables that talk about the scalability of our server, and how do we sort of think about how to right-size these things from the beginning? So environment is the first. Again, we've taken our survey. We kind of know where we're going to host, either on some machines, bare metal machines, maybe on site, maybe in Azure or AWS. So physical or VM considerations are things that we want to take in mind. Noisy neighbors in a VM environment might be something we want to consider because that's going to have an impact on our Tableau server. What our network connections look like, so connecting to data sources, connecting to the end users or other web servers that we want to look at are all considerations. As well as what our data environment looks like. How much data are we going to consume in our initial use cases? Where does that data live? Do we have to connect to it live because there's a security at the database layer or it updates often? Or are we going to use primarily extracts to get started? And then we should talk about what our content looks like. So what are those workloads? Are our use cases lots and lots of rows of data but simple dashboards, so they're going to be very heavy on the data and extract side? Or are they more just KPIs that we want to get in front of our executives? So smaller use cases, simpler dashboards. As well as how are we going to be using the Tableau server? Do we have lots of creators? Is everyone a creator? So there's going to be lots of publishing and new content, which is a heavier load on the server. Or there are a few select creators to get started with a lot of viewers. That's going to really change how we think about setting the server up. Now, for a new deployment, the things on the left-hand side that are infrastructure related, we know. We know what environments we have available to us to install the server. We know the data that we have to get started. But we don't know what that workload or usage looks like, so we're making some guesses. Blueprint has a couple of guides to help you make sort of a guess, but we're going to want to deploy and then be agile as our server grows or as we see the impact of our use cases on our servers. Now, for an existing deployment, we have data that we can work with, which is great. So we can use that existing deployment as a baseline and either grow or make changes based on the data we collect. And we'll walk through what some of that looks like. Another thing we want to consider with our deployments is having a test environment available. This allows us to maintain continuity when we do upgrades, if we want to make a change to our architecture, as well as do load and scalability testing. A best practice with your test environment is to have it the same size as your production environment so that you can make apples to apples comparisons on things like performance, things like loading new data sources and new drivers and things like that. Tableau Server is a little bit unique in that the way that we do content flow is that your production server usually has sandbox projects, test and UAT projects, and production projects. So that happens on your production platform. Your test environment is really for testing new infrastructure use cases or new infrastructure experiments. So back to Goofus Gallant Corp, using the Blueprint Planner and making some guesses, they've decided that since Tableau is not yet mission critical and they're just rolling it out, they're going to start with a single node 8-core server, which is a little small, but again, we're just getting started here. There's basic redundancy of the processes built into Tableau. So if one of the processes like a VizQL server goes down, there's another one to pick it up. But they haven't deployed high availability 3-node cluster. Again, Tableau is not yet mission critical at Goofus or Gallant Corp. So they chose that same architecture. So again, let's check in with Goofus and see what choices they made, though, in this deployment part. So Goofus doesn't manage their client tool installations. The big impact being users are going to have different mismatched versions and different experiences when they go publish to this server. Also, they have to deal with license keys. So every time someone installs, they have to go email IT and say, hey, what's our license key for this? They don't create a test environment. Everything's happening in prod. So downtime is not really predictable because they're not able to test. Over at Gallant, of course, they're making better choices. They do package their installers, making it an easy experience for their end users, and they're publishing those installers either to a central IT page or to a BI or Tableau wiki, where you can just go centralized information and download those tools. They also install a test platform, so they're able to experiment and even right off the bat determine, based on what they know of their use cases, the best architecture because they can start testing it. And that gets us through sort of that initial deployment, the things that we really want to consider in some of our options. Next, we're going to move into monitoring. So we've made our guesses on what that server should look like, but how do we keep an eye on it to see are things healthy and are they behaving the way that we want them to?
So monitoring is one of the key areas that helps us move in an agile way with Tableau. So let's talk through some of the tools and techniques we have available to us. So when we talk about monitoring, we typically divide that into two broad categories. First, there's the infrastructure side, and then there's the content side. Let's first talk about infrastructure. So on infrastructure, there's a wide variety of third-party monitoring tools, which are mentioned on the slide here, that you can use to monitor your server hardware and your network and so forth. There's also a few Tableau-specific tools, which we'll talk about a little bit further on. They include things like the Resource Monitoring Tool, Tabmon, and LogShark. One of the primary ways or one of the first ways you'll want to get started with monitoring is just to check on system uptime. So you don't want your users ever getting to a page where it says Tableau can't be logged into or there's a page not found. So setting up system uptime monitoring is one of the first things you'll want to accomplish. And this can be done in a variety of ways. For example, if you have a load balancer, you can set up a heartbeat health check with that, like a ping test, or maybe the load balancer looks for the existence of the fave icon on one of the gateways, or checks to make sure that the login page will load. You can do that and then also set up alerting for yourself to be notified if Tableau server goes down. Additionally, there is a Tableau Server feature called the Server Status XML page, and the address for that is listed at the bottom of this slide. And what that does is it communicates back to you the overall health of various components of Tableau Server. So that's basic system monitoring. What if you want to take it to the next level? Well, if you're a Tableau Online customer, we do this for you automatically, and the page you see on your screen is actually a Tableau Online health check page that gives a status of all the various components of Tableau Online. You might be interested in doing something like this for yourself, and this is actually a great opportunity for IT to engage with the community around a comprehensive monitoring page or a wiki status page, where maybe at the top of the screen you indicate the status of various Tableau services and systems, and then lower down you talk about things like maintenance schedules, planned upgrades, you provide links to platform installers, a calendar of events, classes, and so forth. So this can really become a systematic destination point for IT and the community to engage together around uptime and monitoring. Additionally, you'll want to look at CPU monitoring. Now, Tableau is a little bit unique among enterprise applications in that it is very bursty. It will momentarily, for a few minutes at a time or a few seconds at a time, go out and grab 100% of available CPU cycles. So when you're monitoring CPU usage for your Tableau server nodes, what you'll want to do is make sure you set up high granularity monitoring, no less than every 5 minutes or less monitoring of catching the CPU usage. And what you're looking for here is we don't want to see sustained periods for long times of 80% or higher CPU utilization. If it gets above that, it's a sign you may either need faster CPUs or more cores. So monitor that. And specifically, there's two processes that can impact user experience a lot, and those are the VizQL and the data engine, that if they're starved of CPU cycles, your users are going to experience slow load times potentially. There's also another important process called the Postgres server that runs the repository, and that will tend to consume more resources as you scale up users. Next, you'll want to monitor memory. So as a rule of thumb, we try to keep memory usage or free memory at least 25%. That's not a hard and fast rule necessarily. But what you're going to notice is as you're monitoring memory usage, Tableau is going to grow its memory footprint over the course of a day or even the week. Tableau goes out and grabs memory, loads sessions, and caches things in memory. So don't be surprised if you see memory usage climbing for processes. That is normal. Eventually, some processes do release memory, but it is normal for it to grow and then stay at a large memory footprint. One area in particular to watch out for is backgrounders. If you've set up dedicated backgrounder nodes, and especially if you've got a lot of backgrounders and big data sources like Redshift, where you might be doing large extract refreshes with hundreds of millions of rows, keep an eye on memory because the backgrounder can briefly grab tons of memory, and it'll need that in order to keep the job going. There's also storage. So a couple points on storage here is you're looking not only at free space, but also I/O bandwidth and disk queue length. What we like to see as a minimum is 20% of disk space free on all nodes, and that is a bare minimum. For example, on the primary node where you're doing backups and restores, the TS back file is compressed. Well, when you're making that file or uncompressing it to restore it, it will temporarily go out and grab a lot of disk space. You know, it could be 3-5 times the size of that back file. So you'll want to make sure you've got plenty of space available, especially on the backgrounders and that initial node. Backgrounders will consume a lot of space during extract generation time for temp files and so forth. So keep an eye on disk space. And when you're given the choice, deploy SSDs or even an SSD RAID array. Tableau definitely benefits from solid state disk storage. So those are the key areas for infrastructure monitoring. Let's pivot now and talk about content monitoring. Now, content monitoring is a place where we have an opportunity in IT to engage with the business, because this is really starting to build the data culture and understanding with the business, how are you using Tableau, and providing them insights into how their content is being consumed. Let's talk through some of the tools we have there. So one of the #1 tools is the built-in admin view dashboards. And the first one that I have up here on the screen is called Stats for Load Times. And this answers the question that should be in the forefront of everyone's mind: are users having a good experience? And this is a great point where we can engage with the community and help start that data culture going by checking in with the business and saying, hey, is Tableau running fast enough? Are your dashboards loading fast enough? This admin view gives you the data point to talk about that and jumpstart those conversations and back things up with data. If you want to download this dashboard, you can create a custom version of it and then publish it back to Tableau Server, maybe for site admins or certain content authors to use to get insights into how their content is being used and how fast it's loading at different times over the course of the week. Additionally, there's another admin view that's really great for analyzing subscriptions and extracts. This is called the backgrounder wait times view. I might have that name just a little bit wrong, but it's one of the views that shows you the delays in queued extract refresh jobs or subscriptions. And what you see here in this viz is those red dots indicate spikes where there's a massive wave of jobs getting scheduled all at once. You only have a certain number of backgrounders available, so jobs are getting queued up and having to wait to process. So when you see those red dots hopping up there, that's a sign users are having to wait for their jobs to finish. This is another awesome opportunity to engage with your business community and teach them and work with them so they understand, not everybody can schedule a job at 8 a.m. in the morning. And if everybody's scheduling on the hour at 8, 9, and 10 a.m., well, we're going to experience these intermittent waves where we don't have enough backgrounders available. And so a best practice to begin fostering right off the bat is let's schedule these jobs out over the course of a day. And this admin view gives us great insights for having those conversations. Also, make sure that you have set up the SMTP email configuration for your Tableau server. This is where you can configure in TSM alerts so that you can get notifications if services go up or down, or if they're owners of extract refreshes can get email notifications if their jobs fail, and IT can get disk space warnings in the event that your thresholds are exceeded. Those are the inbuilt tools. There's a whole ecosystem of tools that are provided by the community or serviced by the community. And one of the most powerful ones is what we're calling community data sources. And this is another opportunity for IT to engage with the business here. So community data sources are available for download on Tableau's GitHub page. And you can Google that, Tableau Server Insights Data Sources on GitHub. And what these are is it's a series of data sources that access the repository and make it friendly for reporting. And then you can publish these data sources up for your content authors and site admins so they can get insights themselves and see how their content is being used. And if you're concerned about security, for example, if you've got lots of sites, you could implement row-level security in these data sources to control access to content stats only for owners or members of certain sites. So that is definitely possible to do. And that just helps your users decrypt and demystify what's going on in the Tableau repository. So these are gold, and every implementation ought to go out and download these and have a look and share them back with the community if it makes sense. One of the other tools that is new in Tableau 2019-3 is the server monitoring tool. Now, the server monitoring tool requires the server management add-on license. And what this tool does is it brings together infrastructure monitoring, like hardware monitoring, and content monitoring and alerting all into one place. So it saves you time as an IT administrator by bringing that all under one roof. Okay, let's check back in with Goofus and Gallant and see how they've each approached the monitoring phase here. So Goofus Corp, they decide they're only going to rely on those built-in admin views. And what that does is it cuts them off from a wealth of information that would be available from custom admin dashboards and data sources. And so they're really flying around with a narrow scope of insight into their Tableau server. Additionally, they set up CPU monitoring, but they only do so at a one hour average usage. And that's an old school IT way of monitoring CPU usage. It doesn't work for Tableau Server because it's bursty. We want to catch those brief periods where 10 users are loading vizzes all at once. And so we've got to have a higher grain if we're going to see that. They also don't monitor any Tableau-specific processes. So the impact here is, while they can see overall server health and memory usage and so on, they don't know what is doing what inside Tableau Server. It's a black box to them, so they're lacking that insight. On the other hand, Gallant Corp downloads the admin views and builds custom versions of them. And they also go out to the community and they get custom admin views that lots of other people have built. And they set up those custom data sources as well. And they also establish alerters so that key people can be notified when thresholds are breached. They make sure that CPU monitoring is occurring in 5-minute or less grain so that they can catch those peaks and really see those intermittent spikes in Tableau usage and decide if an action needs to be made. They watch Tableau server specific processes, and they can use tools like Tabmon to do that, or the server monitoring tool to do that. So they can see, relative to where CPU time is being spent on the background or relative to the VizQL service. All right, so we've talked about monitoring. Now let's transition into maintenance. And the goal of maintenance here is really to focus on change management and adapting to the business and making sure that we're able to evolve and grow and upgrade Tableau and introduce new features.
Right, and that monitoring really does inform our maintenance cycle, as well as sharing that monitoring and our maintenance cycles out with our business users. We create this great feedback loop where our maintenance is driven not by problems that occur, but by things that we see happening in the near future because we're talking. Unless, of course, we have unplanned maintenance. So this happens, right? And we just need to be ready for it. We've already set up monitoring on system downtime, but we get the alert, hey, your system's down. Or there's some kind of problem where some function, maybe a data connector is not working the way it should on server, and you need to get that fixed. So a lot of our customers don't think to engage Tableau support early, as well as have all of their details ready when they first engage. On any kind of server issue, the first thing our support team is going to ask is, can I have a copy of your logs? So knowing how to generate those logs through TSM, having them ready and uploading them the second you start that case can really save you time and make sure that the engineer has what they need to get going. As well as having tools like LogShark available. So LogShark is a log parsing tool. It's freely available out on GitHub. It takes your server logs and produces a series of Tableau dashboards to give you visual insights into what's going on in your server. You can quickly see if the server is maybe contention, it's being used very heavily and things are slowing down as a result. So it kind of goes hand in hand with CPU monitoring. Or you can see if services have been restarting, maybe because they've been running out of memory. So it's a great place to quickly try to solve problems or at least figure out what's occurring on your server. The other thing that we want to think about is RTO, RPO, or SLAs. So the first two terms I hadn't heard of before until I read through Blueprint. But restore time objectives or restore point objectives. So what is your sensitivity to system downtime? And this really depends on how mission critical is your Tableau server. So we established at the beginning, Goofus and Gallant Corp are both not yet mission critical, which is why they have these single node deployments. So that would be, in their case, maybe no standby cluster. So they have a single node of Tableau. If Tableau goes down for some reason, maybe their hardware fails, or there's some sort of something comes through and just catches the server on fire, it may take several hours or even days to get that fully reinstalled on new hardware, get your DNS repointed, and do your restore. Now, as Tableau becomes more mission critical, you might have a low restore time objective, and you'd want a dedicated DR cluster set up. In that case, if the server were to go down, maybe in minutes or even seconds, you could switch over and have a continuity of your analytics platform. And that would look something like this. You have a load balancer that's pointing to your production cluster, and then on a daily basis, you're backing up that production cluster and restoring it directly into DR. In the event of an outage, your load balancer may even automatically just flip DNS over to that DR cluster while you're doing your repairs. Now in DR, you don't have subscriptions running, so you're not getting 2 copies of every email. You don't have alerts going, so users aren't getting alerts from both prod and DR. But you're likely still running extract refreshes so that the refreshes are, and extracts are fresh during the day, again, so that you don't have stale data sitting out in DR. In the event of extended downtime, you're probably going to go turn on subscriptions and alerts in DR, set up the SMTP server, so again, you can keep running while you fix your main issues. Other little maintenance and housekeeping things that we want to do, TSM maintenance cleanup keeps your repository tidy. So that's all of your metadata, some of your event logging that happens in that Postgres repository. I like to do this on a weekly or monthly basis. It also goes and cleans up temp files on your location. Another thing to look at, server-wide, is stale content. So the hope would be that your community is cleaning up their own content, making sure it's live and fresh. But as a server admin, we know that not everyone keeps their files clean. So there are a number of tools out there on the community. This is one example, the Stale Content Remover Workbook, that simply looks through your repository and says, hey, what hasn't been touched in 120 days? If no one's looking at a dashboard, maybe we should archive that. Maybe we should email the content owner and say, hey, pull this off or we're going to pull it off for you, right? To keep the server clean and light and, again, not have to buy disk space before we need it. And that gets us into things like upgrade planning. So what are our triggers for upgrades? Now, we know that from an infrastructure standpoint, we're monitoring, we're looking at our CPU usage. If we see CPU usage start to creep up, or we see those load times start to increase in a way that we don't like the look of it, that's a trigger for us to start testing out maybe more cores, faster cores, more hardware, more nodes in our environment. As well as we need to think about what does our upgrade cycle look like, or update cycle. Now, Tableau releases monthly. Wouldn't it be great if we could update our enterprise software every month? That would be awesome. That's not realistic. There is an issue that in a lot of enterprises, they have a 2-year, every other year upgrade cycle, which doesn't really work for Tableau users because Tableau releases sort of this web continuous innovation process. There's always great new features coming out. So there's often this conflict between IT, which wants a nice stable, extended upgrade cycle, and the business community that wants things really fast. So what we see be successful is something more like a 6-month cycle based on new use cases that are coming up and new features that are coming up for the business. We'll kind of talk about that a little more in just a second. Intel gathering is important. Again, this is that back and forth between IT and your Tableau community or your business user BI community. Being in that constant communication lets you know, oh, hey, we're planning a new project. We're going to ingest another billion rows into our extracts. You want to be ahead of that, and that's where just talking helps. As well as watching for growth. We have these monitoring tools, and we want to know, oh, we're onboarding new users. You're going to add maybe a bunch of contractors onto the server. Both talking to the community and watching those admin views to see more dashboards are coming on, more users are clicking in, data that we would get from those shareable resources and workbooks. So let's talk a bit about sort of this upgrade process. This is a new little cycle that we get in. Research is important. So does the upgrade actually have features that you need? It may be that you've hit your 6-month cycle and there's a new release out, but there's nothing really killer that your business users need there. So maybe you delay and you have a 9-month cycle for this next upgrade. Again, that's that back and forth is there something we need there? Next, you prepare for the upgrade, and that's just data collection, right? We've done our survey, we know where things run, so we're just going to make sure that our test environment is ready to go there. As well as if there are new features that maybe have new requirements, we just want to read up on those. Maybe I need to open some new ports, or maybe there's a new feature that's a little CPU intensive. Things like Ask Data that has its own sort of new services that are a little more intensive for CPU. Then we test it in our test environment. We just make sure it doesn't break, make sure it's smooth, and that we can upgrade cleanly. Then we actually perform the upgrade. This seems to make sense. If we have a DR environment, we flip over to it and upgrade our production server, or we notify our users on the wiki that, hey, in 2 weeks, we're going to perform an upgrade, and we might have some downtime. Then, of course, the validation. Once the upgrade's done, we want to go make sure things are rendering right, make sure extracts are running before we flip it back to our users. We should talk a minute about load testing. So TabJolt is on our GitHub page. It's an open source load testing tool that we use to try to A/B test our servers. And again, A/B testing is important here. You want to establish a baseline using TabJolt and then build from that. So maybe we want to scale up our server. We have a new complex use case, and we want to see if adding more cores will make that dashboard render a bit quicker, or those sets of dashboards render a bit quicker. TabJolt gives us a way to test our existing architecture and then compare it to a new one by doing back-to-back tests so that we can make data-driven decisions and be very confident that we're choosing or making the right choices in our architecture. Maybe I have use cases where it's simple, but I have so many users coming in that I need more VizQL processes so that those users have a better experience. Those architecture changes in the Tableau Server are things you can use TabJolt to test with. Again, in our test environment, which is hopefully the same size as our production environment, so we're making apples-to-apples comparisons in an ideal world. Another thing we should talk about, and you hear this mentioned a lot at Tableau, we talk about scaling up and scaling out, but when should you scale up or scale out? And when I say scaling up, I mean adding more cores to a single server. Maybe I have an 8-core server now, which is what we're starting with, but have really complex data sources. I have lots of rows of data. I have very complicated queries that I'm trying to do in Tableau. That's a data engine problem, and data engine is hyper, and it likes lots and lots of cores. Scaling out means adding more nodes to our cluster. And you would scale out when you're happy with the way things are performing and your use cases are performing, but you're just going to add more and more users on top of it. So that would be adding more identical nodes just to handle those additional users coming in. Let's check back in with Goofus Gallant and see what Goofus Corp is doing from a maintenance standpoint. So Goofus only keeps one backup. It's really not an IT best practice in any way, because what if there's a problem with that backup? Goofus doesn't rehearse disaster recovery. Again, IT best practice. You need to make sure if you have DR that it works, that you're able to fail over. At least every time you upgrade, you should be retesting your whole DR strategy. They never clean up stale content. As a result, people have this impression there's a lot of junk on the Tableau server, and they don't know what's being actively maintained and what's not. They're also buying disk drives a lot more than they expected because they're just filling that stuff up. And over time, because they're not cleaning up their repository with that TSM maintenance cleanup command, things start to slow down and log files start to build up on the server, again, eating up disk space that they don't need to waste. And they're only upgrading every other year, which creates friction between IT and the users. Users are disappointed, and as a result, have less trust in IT. Gallant, on the other hand, he just does everything right. He scripts his backups, so he doesn't have to worry about it. And he's keeping 7 dailies, 4 weekends, 18 month-end backups. He has lots of storage. But again, he has a great disaster recovery plan. If there's an issue where backups get corrupted or there's some sort of auditing trail that they need to go through, he's fully covered. He practices twice a year around his upgrade cycles in his DR environment, so he's confident that if anything happens, planned or unplanned, things are going to be stable, and his end users will continue to have a good experience. And then for that unused content, he has a script that goes in. Again, some of these are available out on the community forums. A script that just monitors the server, looks for things that are maybe 90 days or 120 days old, and automatically emails the content owner, hey, do something about this, or we're going to pull it off for you. And then negotiates and preps for that 6-month upgrade cadence. And it really is a negotiation, right, to get this. If it's IT-led, that's awesome. So we've talked about maintenance, we've talked about monitoring, we've talked about deployment, or in the opposite order, deployment, monitoring, and maintenance. Again, so that we can be responsive. And we've also talked about sharing these things out with our community so that we're working hand in hand and we're ready for things and can be not reactive to change, but we can do change ahead of time. Proactive, sorry. So what do we do next? How do we get to the next 10,000 users? Well, Goofus Corp, sorry, this cracks me up. This is like my whole life in a nutshell. Goofus, he wants it fast because he's hungry right now. Acts reactively. They look at the environment only when there's a problem. Users come to IT and complain, hey, Tableau's slow. And as a result, they have a bad impression both of Tableau as a platform. They don't trust IT because IT is not ahead of things. They're just not, it's not a good experience. They don't reevaluate Blueprint. So the Blueprint assessments are really a way to just reframe your mind and kind of reset. So every time there's a new major use case or a major growth that's happening or an upgrade, it's great to go revisit those Blueprint planners just to mentally reset. So you can say, oh, this is the landscape of what I'm dealing with. Maybe I need to grow my server considerably more than I thought. Or maybe we can scale back our upgrade plans because we don't have new use cases in the next 6 months. They're 12 or 18 months out. They also miss out on new projects because they're not talking to those business owners. So maybe your marketing team says, hey, we have clickstream data now on our website, and we're going to bring in 500 million rows, maybe 1 billion rows next year into the server. But they're not telling IT that because there's not a line of communication there. There's not a community that's engaged with the infrastructure team. As a result, things happen on the server, and they're caught by surprise when the server can't handle it. And of course, they wait till the last minute to do upgrades. So the business users demand, I need this new feature. I have to have it. It's so cool. And there's tension there so that the business users just don't trust IT to make good decisions for them. Over at Gallant, of course, just does everything right. They monitor and engage with the business. They share their monitoring results. They share their plan for the server. And 12-month planning is great, again, because there's that communication going. They set up triggers. So these triggers are, my CPUs have hit 80%. Let's go rerun our whole Agile process again and reevaluate. What do we need to do for our next sizing exercise? Let's test out a new architecture to see if we need to add more cores to our server. Maybe just considerably faster cores will help, or maybe we need some more nodes. They see that growth is accelerating faster, which is really typical. And we started with a single 8-core server, which is fairly small. Gallant noticed that, hey, it's small, use is accelerating, so we need to build out a 3-node cluster with HA because we're also getting mission critical sooner. And they're aware of new use cases that are coming on board. And of course, they built this virtuous cycle. And this is what we really mean about being Agile. We monitor, we see triggers, and we proactively go in and start our process over. We start our upgrade cycle over, we start our deployment cycle over, so that we have an established process and we're not doing guesswork. So what can you do? Well, you can do the blueprint assessment. Again, it's just a way to reframe, right? It's paperwork, but it's really helpful and it helps you to succeed as well as share with other people, hey, what does our infrastructure landscape look like? What does our data landscape look like? And what are the use cases the business really cares about? And always, always engage with your user community and share your plans. And really what that means is don't be like Goofus. Don't scare away your business owners who can be a bit squirrely. Instead, reach out. Share, share, share all the time. Now, if you want to do this today, you can go right downstairs to the data village. There's a blueprint booth. And you can take those assessments on computers that are sitting down there, have an expert sit next to you, walk you through the process, and get that out to you. Again, it's just this great tool that we've developed that we didn't have before. We didn't have something as comprehensive as Blueprint to really help you build both deployments, culture, community, and really have a successful and agile system. Thank you guys so much for coming. We collect data. We're a data company. If you could please, thank you. That was it? All right, I'll take it. I'll take it. Thank you guys so much. Reviews are super helpful. They allow us know, should we rerun this again next year? Should we do something different? And really, thank you so much.